Good evening and welcome to the 2021 federal election debate for the riding of St. Catharines. My name is Mishka Balsam and I'm the CEO of the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce, and on behalf of my board of directors and colleagues, it is my privilege to be hosting this important dialogue. Let me start out by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee people. We recognize and deeply appreciate their historic connection to this place. We also recognize and never take for granted the contributions of Métis, Inuit, and Indigenous people, both in shaping and strengthening the municipality in particular, and our province and country as a whole. With less than 1 week to go, the parties are focusing on key issues as you, the electorate, makes their final voting decision. We extended an invitation to all registered candidates for this riding, and we are pleased to welcome the Liberal Party candidate, Chris Biddle. He is a lawyer who has held the seat for the Liberal Party since 2015. Rebecca Hahn is representing the People's Party of Canada. She is a Niagara College Human Resource Management grad and runs a business with her husband. Tricia McLennan represents the NDP. She serves as Brock University's Intercultural Communications Coordinator and is an author as well. Catherine Rhodes is the Green Party candidate. The McMaster University grad is a business owner and an avid outdoors person. And Christina Waller represents the Conservative Party. She holds degrees from both Wilfrid Laurier and the University of Toronto and is the Executive Director of a Global Healthcare Foundation. Thank you all for joining us this evening. This debate is being recorded and live streamed to our YouTube channel, Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce, and will be available on our website, ngncc.ca as well. If you wish to enable live transcript and you currently are joining us via Zoom, not YouTube, please refer to the button on your Zoom screen for that option. We had in excess of 200 individuals signing up for tonight, some joining us via Zoom, others via YouTube. Many of you have actually taken the time to submit questions in advance of this debate. And in reviewing the important topics that you wanted to see discussed, we felt that it was best for us to actually group them into 6 categories. And those categories are pandemic recovery, equality and affordability, truth and reconciliation, foreign policy, our economy, and climate change. And now it is my great pleasure to hand the debate over to my colleague, Hugo Cheshire, Director of Policy and Government Relations, your moderator for this evening.
Thank you very much, Mishka, and my thanks to our candidates for joining us here tonight, and to our audience for taking the time to hear from our candidates. I want to say how much I appreciate every candidate here for being willing to perform the public service of representing the community of St. Catharines in Parliament. Being a member of Parliament is a difficult job, and standing for the office is not much easier. I hope that by the end of this evening, we will have not just a grasp of where our candidates stand on important policy questions, but of who they are as people and as members of our community. I shall now briefly go over the rules of our debate. Each candidate has been invited to give an opening statement, and those statements will be delivered in the order determined by a random draw in which the candidates participated a short while ago. The order in which questions are answered will cycle in a pattern based on the outcome of the random draw. After we have concluded all the questions we have time for, each candidate will then be invited to deliver a closing statement in reverse order to that of the opening statement. Each candidate will also have 5 opportunities to offer a rebuttal during the debate, which they may request at any time during the course of a particular question. We have asked the candidates not to use these rebuttals to question one another. These are the rules of our debate, and I look forward to an informative and entertaining discussion. Finally, though, these debates are not the last word on anything we discuss tonight, and we encourage everyone to be inquisitive and to ask follow-up questions of any of the candidates, whose contact information can be found on the GNCC's candidate tracker. I'm sure that they would be happy to hear from you. Without further ado, I shall now proceed to our first question. As Mishka said, our first topic is the COVID pandemic, and more than 25,000 Canadians, including 425 in Niagara, have now died from COVID-19, and we are entering a 4th wave.
Not to interrupt you, Hugo, do we have opening statements?
I'm sorry. I messed that up. Yep, we do indeed have opening statements. I will go first to Ms. Rhodes for her opening statement. You have 90 seconds.
I forgot to unmute. I'm sorry about that. Thank you, Hugo. I would like to thank the Chamber of Commerce for having me, my colleagues for being here, and the businesses in our community for having each other's backs during this trying time. Outside of a pandemic, the elephant in the room for businesses is always emissions. So I'm going to start there, get into the heavy stuff, and hopefully end on a high note, so bear with me. Business in Canada, and that includes exports and private companies, is heavily reliant on a carbon-biased economy. Emissions are up, and the UN has declared a global climate crisis. I'd like to say business is good, but the truth is we're not making money. You know business is bad when the billionaires are going broke. We've said goodbye to Eaton, Sears, and Zellers. And when big business is squeezed, small businesses aren't far behind. We've seen massive closures. Canadians would rather wait months for shipping or line the pockets of American giants like eBay and Amazon than deal with a lack of tech infrastructure that has made domestic retailers so much less attractive. One day, we'll be able to refer to this as the old times. We'll say back in 2021, we didn't know better. The pay gap was massive, racially and gender biased, politics were divisive, and even the people at the top, the highest income earners, were worried that their own kids and grandkids wouldn't be able to afford a home. I'm 100% behind the Green Party because I believe in bold action, big changes, and a strong commitment to innovation. And yes, believe it or not, I'm an optimist. I hope you'll listen to me tonight when I talk about a commitment to human rights beyond the most basic needs. In a green future, we'll all be living in our dream homes and paying pennies a day to run them because of clean energy grids. I'm an optimist like most business owners, and I believe it's Canada's time to shine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rhodes. And I turn the microphone to Mr. Biddle for your opening remarks, sir.
Thank you so much, Hugo, and thank you to the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce for hosting the debate tonight, and for everyone tuning in to listen. In 2015, I had the honor of being elected as your Member of Parliament with a promise to deliver for the people of St. Catharines, fighting for things like the Port Dalhousie Piers. I was fortunate enough that my children, age 5 and 3, had their first walk along the Port Dalhousie Piers thanks to our government's investment. We've seen the first affordable housing units built in St. Catharines since the 1970s, and historic investments in transit and infrastructure. We have a commitment to take real action on the climate crisis and ensure that our seniors have a dignified and healthy retirement. Throughout COVID, we promised we would have your backs, and we did. CERB, wage and business supports, and ensuring that there was enough vaccines for everyone to get vaccinated 2 months ahead of schedule. We're #1 in the G20, but we're the only party with a real plan to do better, and I look forward to discussing that. Furthermore, we're the only party with a real plan to finish the fight against COVID-19 and build a better future for tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Waller, I now turn to you for your opening remarks.
Thank you, Hugo, and good evening, everyone. And it's an honor to be here today, and thank you to the GNCC for providing us with this platform to discuss our political positions openly and respectfully. Before I get into the heart of the debate, I do want to address what's happened in St. Catharines over the last few days, because I know it's probably on a lot of people's minds. Before you have 5 candidates, and while we disagree on policy, I do believe that all of us want to work the hardest that we can in order to serve Canadians to the best of our ability. The vandalism that occurred at Chris's house and at the mayor's house over the last few days was inexcusable. One of the greatest things about being Canadian is that we're allowed to debate openly, and targeting, harassing people who are serving at their homes is just wrong. I'm running as a Conservative because I can care about our community. I care about universal healthcare, mental health and addiction, about housing and rental costs, about crime and community safety, about small businesses and their employees, and about protecting the most vulnerable. We have a plan to address all of these issues and more. Aaron O'Toole is a proven leader. He served 12 years in our Air Force. He's a regular guy with a family who cares about making our community the best that it can be. And he has a great plan to do it. I invite you to join us in securing the future of Canada by voting Conservative.
Thank you very much. Ms. McGlennon, your opening remarks, please.
Thank you so much to everyone, and thank you to the GNCC for allowing us to have this debate. On September 20th, you have a choice between the parties that have broken one promise after another, time and time again, or voting for Jagmeet Singh and the NDP, who are fighting for you. On September 20th, you have a better choice. And let me tell you why. Across Niagara, families are worried about jobs, health of our loved ones, the climate crisis, and public services that everyone counts on. The past 18 months have shown that Canadians can confront any challenge, as we're doing in our community with what's been happening. And when we have to, and when we choose to, we can come together. It's also shown us the importance of having NDP in Ottawa fighting for you, holding the government accountable, and making sure that families across St. Catharines are not forced to settle for less. If we want different results, we have to make different choices. What we need now is the courage to act together, and that's exactly what the NDP have to offer to Canadians. We can make life more affordable for everyday people by investing in healthcare. Our platform is now costed, and we are investing heavily in healthcare. And we can invest in housing, pharmacare, and childcare. I ask you for your vote on September 20th. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, I turn to Ms. Hahn for your opening remarks. You have 90 seconds. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Hugo, for that. And thank you for having me here today. So I'm here for one reason and one reason only, and that is because I care about people and I care about the future of this country. These lockdowns have highlighted the blatant disregard for the well-being of Canadians from all levels of government. I couldn't stand by and watch family and friends' lives being ripped apart by lockdowns. I couldn't stand by and watch children's mental health issues spiral out of control. And I couldn't stand watching people lose everything that they have worked on because of a negligent government. So in 2020, I began contacting politicians and questioning the justification for lockdowns. And what I found was there was actually no answers. I was also getting shamed, ridiculed, called names, and ultimately blocked by people like Rebuttal for simply asking questions. It became blatantly clear that none of them wanted to find answers and none of them were concerned with ending the lockdowns. The only thing this government was concerned about was ensuring obedience and compliance from their constituents. It has become more and more apparent over the past 18 months that politicians do not care about the mental, physical, and emotional health of their constituents. So when I was asked to run for the PPC, the only party standing up against these lockdowns, it was a no-brainer. So I'm not a career politician. I may not know all the answers to these questions, but I have run a successful contracting business with my husband for the past 15 years. And I will apply those skills that I've developed as the Chief Financial Officer and the Human Resource Manager to create and implement policies that will help our riding and our country prosper for generations to come.
Thank you very much to all our candidates. And now we'll proceed on to the questions. I do apologize for jumping the gun. These questions were drawn from our community and they are so good. I just couldn't wait to get into them. But as Mishka said, our first topic is, of course, the pandemic. And our first question is that more than 25,000 Canadians, including 425 in Niagara, have now died from COVID-19, and we are entering a fourth wave of this pandemic. What federal public health measures, such as vaccine passports, vaccine mandates, or travel restrictions, would you support to halt the fourth wave and bring the novel coronavirus under control? And Ms. Rhodes, I'm going to turn to you first, please.
I'm going to keep forgetting to unmute all night, so it's going to give everyone else an advantage because, yeah, I'll cut into my minute that way, right? Nothing like asking the easy questions right out of the gate, too. My party is committed to extending pandemic benefits so that businesses and individuals are able to recover from. I can really talk today. My party is committed to extending COVID benefits to businesses and individuals so that people are able to make the choice to stay home and make the commitment to their own health. We will support the vaccine passports as much as we possibly can. However, I have had some concerns personally, and others in my party have had concerns from residents, which hopefully will be answered here today, where people are worried about being targeted for their identity. I've already got 10 seconds left, but they are worried about being targeted for their identity, and that these vaccine passports will be overused in order to target people and make their lives more difficult. And I think that's where some of the fear is coming in. I'd better just cut off because I'm going to run out of time. But yeah, there is a lot of fear and a lot of worry on the part of our residents that the vaccine passport is not a good idea, or that some sort of limitation needs to be put on it.
Thank you. I'm now going to turn to Mr. Bittle, please.
Thank you so much, Hugo. Approximately 80% of Niagara residents have stepped up and done their part. They've gotten 2 doses of a COVID-19 vaccine. They've stepped up for their health, their community, and their families. And we need to get that number higher. And every level of government needs to be doing everything they can to ensure we get vaccinated, because that is the path out of not only a public health crisis, but an economic crisis. And I'm surprised that we're the only party that is actually proposing that, or requiring that individuals who get on a plane, a train, or work in a federally regulated workforce need to show proof of vaccines. We know vaccine mandates work. When the provincial government announced their plan, we saw 200,000 new appointments for vaccines. This works, and we need to be doing everything we can to protect our residents. It is the path out of this crisis.
Thank you so much, Mr. Biddle. Ms. Waller, is your turn. The floor is yours. You have 60 seconds.
Thank you, Hugo. I personally am double vaccinated and I support vaccination, and I encourage everybody out there to get one. But we also have to respect the rights of Canadians to determine their own health choices. I don't believe that mandatory vaccine programs would work. If I thought that showing up at somebody's home and saying you must take this would work, then maybe that's something to consider. But I don't believe a mandatory program would work. And I think it's disappointing that Justin Trudeau is continuously trying to divide Canadians and politicize vaccines and the COVID pandemic for his own personal gain. We're in a pandemic right now, and I think if the Prime Minister was serious about addressing this issue, he wouldn't have gone to an election right now. He would have focused on the pandemic and getting us out of it. We were unprepared when the COVID-19 pandemic hit in March of 2020. The Liberals had shut down our global public intelligence health network, so Canada did not have an adequate warning that the pandemic was coming. And we need to take steps to make sure that this never happens again, and that we are able to address the pandemic needs as a country on our own.
Thank you, Ms. Waller. I now turn to Ms. McLennan for your answer, please.
Thank you so much. When we think back to the early days of this pandemic and how people started hoarding toilet paper, it is a leading indicator of the fact that we're all coming out of a really deep and strong trauma. So I just this week had a conversation with someone that I had weeks ago about their not being sure whether or not they should accept the vaccine. And it has come full circle, and they've decided based on the evidence they could gather that they wanted to do that. The NDP supports people. The NDP was there to hold to hold people accountable who are currently in government when they wanted to cut the CERB. And that's exactly what we plan to continue to do, is to help people and hold governments accountable.
Thank you very much for your answer. Ms. Hahn, you are next, please.
So obviously, probably most of you know, I look at this pandemic very differently. As I addressed with City Council on numerous occasions, I have proof that our hospital is overcycling PCR tests. So when you have an issue with the PCR tests that are being overcycled and being used fraudulently, and none of the council wants to do anything about it, you start to raise some red flags. That said, there's also an issue with the PCR test. According to the CDC's lab report, the PCR test can't actually differentiate between the flu and COVID-19, which is what a lot of us have been saying since the very beginning. Furthermore, with regards to the vaccinations, I am not vaxxed, and I do not plan to get a vaccination. And part of the reason is that, first of all, according to Ontario Public Health statistics, my age group has a 99.9% recovery rate, which is extremely high. And I have been watching public health stats since June. And since the vaccine's been rolling out, the death rate has been going up. So That's why I'm against vaccine passports and pushing vaccines on people.
Okay, thank you. We have 2 rebuttals being offered by our candidates, and I will go to them in the order in which I saw them. So, Mr. Bittle, you're up. You have 30 seconds.
Thank you so much, Hugo. And it's disappointing to hear my conservative opponents say vaccine mandates don't work. We've seen it in Ontario working with, as I said, 200,000 new appointments made after a vaccine mandate. Every country that has done it, it's worked. Watching Erin O'Toole suggest he'll convince 90% of Canadians to get the COVID-19 vaccine, he can't even convince 90% of his candidates to get the COVID-19 exam. It is not a plan. The Conservatives do not have a plan to vaccinate Canadians, and only the Liberal Party has a real plan to get us through this crisis.
Thank you. Ms. Rhodes, you are up next with a rebuttal, please.
I would just like to reiterate that the Green Party's concerns are, first of all, that this works by force, not by design. You are forcing people to have vaccination who may or may not want to be vaccinated, or may or may not be able, and that's more the point. There have been no limitations and no answers given as to what any limitations would be. I personally do have a friend who had a very bad reaction to the first half of the vaccine and is worried that she'll be turned into a criminal by this legislation because she's unable, not unwilling, to have the second half.
Hey, thank you. I now see Ms. Waller, you would like to offer a rebuttal as well. Please go ahead.
Yes, Hugo, thank you. With 60 seconds, you can't get everything you'd like in. And I just want to reiterate that Canada's Conservatives understand that we need 2 things to move out of this pandemic. First, we need to make sure that Canada is not caught unprepared again. Second, we need to get our economy moving. And as we navigate out of this pandemic, we need to make sure that we are prepared. So we need to partner with pharmaceutical companies to increase production of critical medicines, focus on restoring domestic vaccine research and manufacturing capacity, and overhaul Canada's national emergency stockpile system to ensure that we have the supplies we need. And then we need to focus on our economy again and get those million jobs back that we lost during the pandemic.
Thank you very much. Ms. McGlennon, I saw you wanted to offer a rebuttal as well, please.
Yes, I just wanted to mention that, in the discussion of the pandemic, it is so much broader than just, to vaccinate or not to vaccinate. People have suffered immensely with respect to mental health, with respect to all of the shocks and experiences that we've had as part of coming in and out of lockdowns. And when we talk about those mandates, we're really just talking about immunization records. This is a public health issue that is being politicized, and we need to do everything we can to work together to make sure everybody is doing what they need to do to make sure they're safe and looked after.
Thank you. And finally, Ms. Hahn would like to offer a rebuttal as well. Go ahead, please.
Yes, just to piggyback off of what Catherine was saying, that's an issue that we need to start talking about that is being ignored by the media and politicians. People are being injured from these vaccinations, okay? I know they're getting censored off social media, which is very concerning because people have a right to know and understand what's going on in the public. I personally have a friend who got the AstraZeneca shot. She has blood clots in her arm. I have another friend who was extremely healthy and fit, who has developed a heart condition. And my niece has 2 friends that are 12 years old that have both developed brain aneurysms since getting vaccinated. So to push these vaccines.
Your time is up at this point. We'll have to move on to our next question. I do apologize. Our next question is also on the subject of the pandemic as well. It is that in the event of a resurgence of the virus and public health restrictions from any level of government, what would you do to support Canadian individuals and businesses? And this time I will turn to Mr. Biddle for his answer, please.
Thank you so much. And I had an opportunity to talk to my neighbor who's at our constituency office, which is Delaterra Bakery. And the owner told me that they wouldn't have gotten through the pandemic without the wage supports, the rent supports, and they employ 34 Niagara residents in downtown St. Catharines. The Prime Minister promised Canadians that we would have their backs, and we have, and we will continue to be there with all of these supports, and even understanding that the tourist sector is still hurting. Though we've recovered almost 95% of the jobs lost during the initial wave of the COVID-19 pandemic, there's a lot more to do. And a Liberal government has been there from the start. With respect to the tourist industry, we're going to be there with more grants and loans available for highly affected sectors. But ultimately, again, the path to getting out of this health crisis and economic crisis is through vaccinations.
Thank you very much. Ms. Waller, I now turn to you, please.
Thank you, Hugo. I touched on some of this earlier, the fact that when the pandemic hit Canada, that we were unprepared. And we are prepared to address this should it continue. We are prepared to prolong the current programs to the end of the year, should the pandemic continue to the end of the year. But as the pandemic changes, so did the needs of businesses and so did the needs of Canadians. And so as Conservatives, we want to make sure that we are addressing the needs as they change. And so as we move forward, we also want to look at changing programs like CEWS and changing it, continuing into our job search plan. We have a job search plan that's meant to get the Canadian economy back up and running and on track. And I'm sorry for that noise, to help small businesses and businesses in our community get people back to work and get our economy up and running again. Right now, we're borrowing $424 million a day, and that is not sustainable as a country. Inflation is the highest it's been in almost 20 years, and it's making everything more expensive for us. Life has become unaffordable in St. Catharines and across Canada, and if we don't start addressing that soon, we're going to be in big trouble.
I do have to cut you off there, unfortunately. Ms. McLennan, your answer, please.
Thank you so much. Trudeau wanted to give unemployed workers just $1,000 per month, but the NDP fought to double it to $2,000 a month. He wanted to give a wage subsidy of just 10%, and we got it to 75%. O'Toole didn't get a single benefit for Canadians during the pandemic, nothing. That's the NDP track record, and that's what we plan to continue to do to support Canadians should we find ourselves back in a lockdown type situation.
Thank you very much. Ms. Hahn, your 60 seconds starts now, please.
So the PPC's plan, of course, is to first and foremost end these unconstitutional lockdowns once and for all. Forcing small businesses to close has been one of the most egregious government overreaches in Canadian history and has been a detriment to this economy. So once we end these lockdowns, we will gradually phase out the CERB to incentivize people to return to work. We'll make sure that kids stay in school so their parents can return to work, and that will enable businesses to meet their staffing requirements. Once we do that, we want to get rid of any unnecessary regulations that are stifling small business and stealing profits from entrepreneurs. We'll phase out subsidies in slow increments and lower the taxes once we get the country's debt down, which of course is not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time to accomplish this after years and years of a reckless spending by the Conservative and the Liberal government. So once we get small businesses back on their feet again, the PPC will start running this country in a fiscally responsible way so Canadians continue to prosper for generations to come.
Thank you. And finally, Ms. Rhodes, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you. The Green Party is the only party that started asking at the beginning of this crisis, if nothing changes, where do we go from here? Let's be honest. Businesses were failing prior to the pandemic due to Canada's archaic tech infrastructure and overpriced telecom rates. We want businesses to succeed in this new economy so that local dollars aren't going to big businesses like Amazon. And not later, not when this pandemic is over, but right now. We're not looking at measures that are going to help you one day, maybe when this pandemic is over. We're definitely looking at measures that are going to help right now. We obviously do plan to extend the COVID benefits and ensure that businesses can continue running through this. But we would also like to create shop local campaigns, create local websites like Amazon that are aggregate sites and allow our residents to shop locally. Lower border fees on business supplies because Canadian businesses are struggling because of the fact that it costs us so much to import. I know this as a business owner. It costs us so much to import things. And generally create a comprehensive recovery plan based on the worst case scenario.
Thank you, Ms. Rhodes. Seeing no rebuttals being offered, I'll move on to our next topic, which is equality and affordability. The median sale price of a home in St. Catharines rose almost 30% in the last year alone, while an adult in the city will wait 16 years for a single-bedroom unit from Niagara Regional Housing. What role would the federal government play in creating more affordable housing under your party's direction? And I go to Ms. Waller, please.
Thank you, Hugo. I think all of us here can agree that we know that the housing prices in Niagara all-time high. At the doors, I hear it from young families who don't think they can afford to live in St. Catharines, from parents who fear that their kids won't be able to stay here and that they won't be able to help raise their grandchildren. The fact is, Canada is not building enough homes to keep up with our growing population. The Liberals had made 6 years of promises to take action on this, and they have not. And that's why Erin O'Toole and our party has come up with a new approach. Under the Canada Recovery Plan, we will make it easier for families to get a mortgage. We will ban foreign investors from buying homes here if they're not planning to move into the building as their primary residence for at least 2 years, incentivize them to invest into rentals. We're going to implement our plan to build 1 million homes during the next 3 years. And also, the government of Canada is the largest real estate owner, and we have 37,000 buildings. We're going to review that portfolio and try and free up 15% of those buildings in order to have more room to do so. And I will rebut later.
Thank you, Ms. Waller. I now turn to Ms. McLennan for your answer, please.
Thank you so much. We know that housing is at crisis levels right here in Niagara and across the country. And we see this as a three-part issue. Those who need housing, so we have to include homeless people in this issue as we've seen the proliferation of homeless people explode. And we also have to keep people in their homes, stopping things like rent evictions from happening. And we also need to make it realistic and feasible for young people to get into the housing market and buy their first homes. We need to stop treating housing as a pyramid scheme and start treating housing as a human right. And the NDP has a plan to do it with 500,000 new units coming on and several other measures to make sure that everybody who can have somewhere safe to live.
Thank you very much. Ms. Hahn, I turn now to you. You have 60 seconds. The floor is yours.
Okay, so, sorry, I got a little pop-up here. So, of course, Economics 101 says when there's a high demand and a low supply, we get higher prices. So that's part of the issue. So we want to actually reduce immigration. Trudeau has an unsustainable immigration policy of bringing 400,000+ immigrants in per year. We're not anti-immigration, we're just anti-mass immigration, especially when we're facing crises like housing crises. So we want to reduce the immigration level down. Also, it's my understanding housing is not typically a federal issue, but what we do have is a province that bogs down developers in so much bureaucracy that it makes home development harder, which is ultimately driving up costs as well. At a municipal regional level, there's even more red tape, zoning issues, and often resistance due to having too many levels of government. So from a federal level, we will support and implement the changes necessary for banking, CMHC, foreign investment, and immigration forum to help support the lower tiers of government in making better policies for housing.
Thank you. Ms. Rhodes, I now turn to you, please.
Sure. Thank you. The Green Party sees homelessness as a three-part issue. Obviously, at the one end, we have people who are homeless and extremely underhoused. What we'd like to do about that is we'd like to stop building buildings and fix what we have. In St. Catharines, we have a number of abandoned spaces. We also want to ensure that abandoned spaces are reduced. There are currently 7,000 people on the low-income housing list. Most of those people are not homeless, they are underhoused. We need to create a guaranteed livable income to ensure that those people can stay in their own homes, not be forced to move out. You don't first create a homelessness problem and then fix it by building a bunch of buildings. You help people where they are now. We are the only party talking about middle income people. 60% of renters in this country are between the $30,000 low income cutoff and the $100,000 low income cutoff to buy a house, and those people will probably be renters for the rest of their lives. We have also made a plan that I can't talk about because I only have 10 seconds, but that includes those people as well.
Thank you very much. Finally, we will hear the answer from Mr. Biddle. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to the grand opening of the YWCA's project that was funded by the federal government under a $70 billion national housing strategy, with our goal over 10 years to end chronic homelessness. The federal government needs to be involved in housing after being absent for so long. But beyond that, we need to unlock home ownership for the middle class. That's why we plan to build 1.4 million houses, ban foreign investment on housing, and we're the only party that's offering a homeowner bill of rights. which will do a few things, but a couple will allow every Canadian to ensure they have a home inspection, which too many people are giving up on, and also ban the process of blind bidding, which is driving up unnecessarily the cost of housing across the country and across Niagara.
Thank you very much. And we have a rebuttal being offered by Ms. Wallace. So I now turn to you. Your 30 seconds begins now.
Thank you, Hugo. I just wanted to finish my thoughts earlier and the fact that all levels of government need to work together on this. We need to partner with municipalities and not just government. We need to work with the private sector to bring in rental units, bring in new rental units to the market. We also want to look at, for affordable housing, enhance the viability of using community land trusts for affordable housing by creating an incentive for corporations and private landowners to donate property to land trusts for the development of affordable housing. We have a supply and demand issue and we need to address it.
Thank you very much. I also see that Ms. McLennan would like to offer a rebuttal, and so I now turn to her. About 30 seconds starts now.
Thank you so much. I also wanted to just finish a thought that I had about our plan that is ready to go right now to invest 500,000 units of quality, affordable housing across the country. And our plan will create jobs that will build the rental, cooperative, and social housing that's so desperately needed. We'll make sure that houses are homes and not places for international super rich to park their cash. And we'll do that by placing a 20% levy on home purchases from investors living outside Canada.
Thank you. I also see that Ms. Rhodes would like to offer a rebuttal, so I'll now turn to her. Thank you.
I just wanted to take another minute to talk about, again, that group that has not been covered by the other parties' plans, because the low income cutoff is around $30,000. The lowest price, or the lowest income that we see people buying a house is $100,000. There are a lot of people between that $30,000 and $100,000 mark. What we would do is we would allow for eco retrofits that would make houses cheaper, because you would be able to run them for a cheaper price. We would cap rental prices and cap housing prices. And regarding chronic homelessness, again, homeless people are not born homeless. It comes from somewhere. They lose their homes. They don't just wake up one day homeless.
Unfortunately, I do have to cut you off. We only have 30 rebuttals. I now move on, seeing no further rebuttals offered, I now move on to our next question, which is that the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives report of 2020 found that Canadians in 4 out of 5 cities examined were paying more than $10,000 per year for childcare. What is your plan to deliver affordable childcare to working Canadian families? And I turn first to Ms. McLennan, please.
Thank you so much for that. Childcare is such an important issue, and we've seen that magnified during the SHE session. The lack of affordable childcare has just sort of intensified with the situation with the pandemic. And what the NDP plan is to continue to work with provinces to implement a $10 a day solution for childcare, to have this across the nation so that nobody should have to worry about childcare. We also know that as a social determinant of health, having safe, affordable, reliable childcare will pay dividends for our society, not just right now, but in the future to come.
Thank you very much. Next up, we will hear from Ms. Hahn. Please go ahead.
Okay, well, we don't actually have a plan for childcare, but not that I'm aware of anyway. But I would say this, I mean, we are committed to investing in Canadians and making better jobs and higher paying jobs for Canadians. So that will definitely help with making childcare more affordable. And we will do whatever we can to make sure that Canadians are well represented. We have a very Canada first, family first approach in everything that we do. And it's my passion, of course. I have children. So we will work with whatever, and we will look into policies and whatnot to make sure that childcare is definitely affordable for all families.
Thank you. Next, I turn to Ms. Rhodes, please. The floor is yours.
I was having some trouble unmuting. Hugo, we already had a plan. And I know this because I went to school as a single parent. I went to school under childcare subsidy. I was able to get an education because my son had free childcare. And I'm going to play right into Chris's hands here because I know that program was a Liberal program. And that was one of the reasons I voted Liberal at the time, was because I wanted a childcare subsidy to come back. We already had that. The Greens will bring back childcare subsidy. We will also incentivize businesses to include childcare in their programs for their employees so that you don't have to go a ridiculous distance to drop your children off. And the other thing we will recognize is that most people in St. Catharines are shift workers and that they're not going to be served by a program that's just 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. They need options outside of that.
Thank you very much. And on that note, we next turn to Mr. Biddle for your answer. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to thank Catherine for highlighting that. That's a program that still exists. We do have subsidized daycare across the country and in Niagara, but we need to build beyond that. The pandemic has seen all the gains in equality in the work, or women in the workforce, and gains in women in the workforce disappear. We've seen labor shortages. We need to get women back into the workforce. Families are paying over $10,000 a year in daycare or childcare in Niagara. And we have a plan for $10 daycare. 8 provinces have signed up. Unfortunately, Ontario isn't one of them. And it's unfortunate, looking at our Conservative friends, that their plan is to cut this and to cut these deals and rip them up. And in their costed plan, $20 billion in cuts to childcare. That's not going to address the labor shortage. That's not going to address women getting back to work. This is an economic plan, but this is also a plan for women and plan for our children.
Thank you. Finally, Ms. Waller, your turn to answer. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Hugo. And I know that having reliable childcare is an important building block to allowing every person who wants to join the workforce to be able to and to achieve true gender equality. The federal Liberals have been promising a government-regulated childcare system for nearly 30 years, and they haven't delivered. Now, on the eve of an election that Canada does not want or need, the Liberals are making promises once again. And forgive me if I'm taking that with a bit of a grain of salt. Justin Trudeau and the Liberals have had 6 years to do something on childcare, and they haven't, and Canadians aren't fooled. That's why we need a different approach. Aaron O'Toole and the Conservatives will convert the childcare expense deduction into a tax credit to cover 75% of the cost of childcare. Our plan will make families earning $150,000 or less better off, with the biggest benefit to families earning less than $50,000. Conservative will put parents back in the driver's seat, like Catherine had mentioned. Not always does a 9 to 5 childcare spot work for most parents. Our plan is flexible and it's reliable.
Thank you. I see that Mr. Biddle would like to offer a rebuttal. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to correct the record a little bit. It was the Stephen Harper government that canceled the deal that childcare with $10 daycare across the country in 2006. It's the same thing Aaron O'Toole is bringing to the table right now. And though a tax credit scheme is great and will help certain families, probably those earning the most, that's not going to create any spaces. That's not going to help middle-class families who need to get their families into work, and it's not going to address the labor crisis that we're facing. We need to get everyone into the workforce and help everyone we can, and $20 billion in cuts isn't going to help that.
Thank you. Ms. McGlennon would also like to offer a rebuttal. Please go ahead.
I have to agree with Chris on that. Canadian parents are tired of the patchwork quilt that we've been calling childcare up until this point. We've seen Quebec do $10 a day childcare for many years, and there's no reason why the rest of Canada can't benefit and reap the benefits from having such a system across the board that everybody has access to. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up to offer a rebuttal is Ms. Hahn. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I just wanted to point out too, with the childcare, these lockdowns obviously further exacerbate there's already an issue with the childcare. So when you close the schools down and then we expect nurses and PSWs to keep working, it creates a massive issue with childcare. So again, ending these lockdowns once and for all will definitely alleviate some of those issues as well.
Thank you. And Ms. Waller would also like to offer a rebuttal, so I turn to her. Your 30 seconds begins now.
Thank you. Our plan isn't to cut, but it is to change the promises that the Liberals had made with $20 billion. So I do want to say that, again, our plan is for right now. It's to help parents immediately. The Liberals have a plan to help parents 5 years from now. We need to help parents right now. Our economy has been hurt, and we need to open it back up again, get people back into the workforce, and our plan will do that immediately.
Thank you. Seeing no further rebuttals to that question, I'll move on to our next topic, which is truth and reconciliation. And we have recently seen shocking new evidence of the abuses that Indigenous people have suffered. What actions would your party take to address the injustices that Indigenous people have faced and continue to face? And I turn first to Ms. Hahn.
Yes, so it's absolutely atrocious what the Indigenous people have endured. One of the big things, it's certainly not going to make up for, the catastrophic things that have happened to them, but we are dedicated to getting clean drinking water to every single Indigenous community. It's absolutely abhorrent that there are, I think, approximately 61 communities that still don't have clean drinking water. In order for anybody to get on their feet and do well for themselves, they need to have access to that basic need. And so our plan is to definitely get them the clean drinking water. And we also want to do a sort of dive into what is going on, where the money is going, because there is a lot of money going to Indigenous communities, but there's very little to show for it. So we want to dive into that, and we want to see if there's any corruption, and we want to get rid of it.
Thank you. Ms. Rhodes, I turn now to you for your answer, please.
I would first like to thank you for saying that these communities continue to face these problems. So often they're being treated as historical, and they're not historical issues. They're happening and continue to happen now. Obviously, our party would first implement all of the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and we would ensure Indigenous-led and autonomous conversation. We would bring Indigenous people into Parliament to speak for themselves. We would end all of the boil water advisories. Now, I do know that a number of the boil water advisories have been ended, and they've been ended very quickly during an election period, which raises the question why so many of these communities went years without clean water and were unable to access it at that time. And we would focus on Indigenous specific housing and also education that is sensitive to Indigenous issues on both ends. So not only in Indigenous communities, but also in communities outside of the Indigenous community, to teach our students not only Indigenous history, but also the future of the various nations.
Thank you. Mr. Bittle, you are next to answer. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Hugo. And the images we saw and the stories we've heard with respect to missing children is horrific. And this has been a priority of our government since 2015. No government has invested more in Indigenous issues than our government, on housing, on education, on healthcare. There's so much more to do, and we will implement all of the calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. But on boil water advisories, we've taken action from the start. This isn't an election year issue. We've lifted 291 boil water advisories over the last 6 years. There are 50 remaining. And of all of those, they are all completed, underway, and funded. We are going to get this job done. COVID has delayed it, but this work is too important to slow down. We will finish the job.
Thank you. Ms. Waller, you are next. Your 60 seconds starts now.
Thank you, Hugo. We understand that our federal government and Canadians need to listen, learn, and actively participate in the process of reconciliation and do the hard work of tackling issues that will improve the lives of Indigenous peoples across Canada. Like many Canadians, I was shocked and saddened by the discovery of the unmarked graves of the children at a number of residential school lands. And while we knew they were there, and we now know there are still thousands of missing children that will never come home, finding the bodies and the unmarked graves was incredibly traumatic for our Indigenous communities across Canada. I want to use this platform quickly to encourage everybody to read the 94 points of the call to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We are committed to, first and foremost, implementing the calls to action 71 to 76 involving missing children and providing healing for families. Also on the clean drinking water, I know Mr. Biddle had mentioned that, this job is in progress. Instead, the federal government chose to go to an election instead of focusing on important issues like this and continuing on the path of reconciliation.
Thank you. And finally, I turn to Ms. McLennan. Go ahead, please. I'm afraid we can't hear you.
Thank you for letting me know that. Indigenous people have got to be sick and tired of being sick and tired. The current government has had years. Previous governments have had years. Once again, if you want different outcomes, you must make different choices. So here's what the NDP is going to do. Under our plan, we will commit to safe and affordable housing on and off reserve for Indigenous people. Clean drinking water now, not 10 years from now. Respectful, safe access to healthcare and community-driven solutions for healing, ending the discrimination and underfunding of Indigenous children's services, and making sure that there is truth, accountability, and justice. And that includes the 94 calls to action and implementing the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples.
Thank you. I see that Ms. Rhodes would like to offer a rebuttal, so I turn to her. You have 30 seconds.
I would just like to state that I have heard COVID-19 blamed for the infrastructure issues and the boil water advisories quite a bit. COVID has been going on. We've been in lockdown for 18 months, but the boil water advisories have been going on in these communities, in some cases for more than 3 years. And in addition to that, there aren't many governments that are going to stop the Trans Mountain Pipeline, which is a case of environmental racism, which I know that my colleague Tricia did bring up in the last debate. And it is a serious issue that we are environmentally attacking these regions.
I do apologize, but we'll have to move on to the next question now. Now we turn to matters of foreign policy. First, I would like to ask, where do you see Canada's opportunities for future foreign trade, and how will we take advantage of them? And I'm going to turn first to Ms. Rhodes again, please.
I was having a bit of trouble unmuting. Canada is currently behind. We are behind the rest of the G7 in terms of foreign trade because we have not come into the future. Our current government and previous governments saw Canada as a supply chain economy, and that's a problem. We are currently using up our natural resources. If Canada wants to be competitive on a global scale, we need to focus on technology. We need to focus on research and development and putting that money into private firms, because currently a lot of our research and development is purely academic, and we do have products and minds and people who are capable of making this stuff going over the border, and so we're not seeing the returns. And I think what needs to happen is that we need to start seeing the returns from what we're already doing, what we're already making, the research and development, the things that we've already created. We need to start seeing the income from that. It shouldn't be going over the border or to other companies.
Thank you. Mr. Bittle, it is your turn. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. And as Niagara, as a border community, we know the importance of trade. Our government has been active on this file from the start, whether it was the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or renegotiating NAFTA with Donald Trump, who was isolationist, opposed to trade, protectionist. We were able to secure a deal, even while Aaron O'Toole was telling us we should take any deal that was open to us. We fought hard for Canadian businesses, for Canadian industries like steel and aluminum, like ASW in Welland. We were there for Canadians. But it can't just be free trade, it needs to be fair trade, which is why we've included labor and environmental protocols in our trade agreements, so that Canadians can be assured that it is a fair deal for them and that they will benefit from trade across the country.
Thank you. Ms. Waller, I now turn to you for your answer, please.
Thank you, Hugo. Canada's Conservatives understand the power of trade to create jobs and strengthen our country, but trade agreements must also respect the interests of Canadian workers and our commitment to human rights and the rule of law. Signing deals with countries that don't share our respect for human rights or high labor and environmental standards hurts Canada. Canada's recovery plan will build stronger ties with those countries who share our values. Countries like Australia, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom to build stronger trade, defense, and diplomatic ties, and we will build deeper trade ties with democracies like India after they were derailed by Justin Trudeau. At the same time, we will protect our jobs and national security by making it harder for state-owned companies from non-free countries to buy Canadian companies, and by withdrawing from the Asian Infrastructure and Investment Bank, a tool to promote Chinese influence.
Thank you. Ms. McLennan, your answer, please.
Thank you so much. Canada has a meaningful role to play on the world stage. Unfortunately, under the current leadership, Canada lost a seat on the UN Security Council, sent weapons to a repressive regime, and stood by while Trump tore families apart at the border. Real leaders show up when it's hard and not only when it's easy. Canada won't be hypocrites on climate change, only just talking the talk. We will work for fair trade, not bad trade deals that serve only corporate interests instead of workers. These are some of the actions that we'll take with an NDP government to ensure that Canada's role in trade makes us proud again.
Thank you. And finally, Ms. Han, 60 seconds starts now.
So I'm going to actually speak on the oil industry, because that is an industry that I know we do take in about $13 billion of oil from other countries. And I think that it's important that we keep a lot of our money into our own economy and further advance our own economy. So I think that, you know, the oil industry has brought in much prosperity to Canadians, and we want to continue with that. The global demand for oil is expected to keep rising, and we're able to fulfill that demand. So I think we need to keep less of that money and getting it from other countries, especially when some of the countries that we get our oil from are human rights abusers. They're dirty producers of oil, and again, they're feeding our economy, not our own. So we want to keep a lot of the industry that can be made in Canada stay in Canada.
Thank you. I see that Ms. Rhodes would like to offer a rebuttal, so I turn to you. The floor is yours.
Greens are committed to a just recovery. You do not create industries by killing the workers. You cannot continue to sell oil because it is simply not renewable. Canada is in absolutely the wrong business. You talk about oil being a $13 billion industry. Clean technology is a $2.5 trillion industry that Canada is not in. There are a number of industries that Canada is not investing in. When I talk about fashion companies closing, I mean it. That is billions of dollars that are just walking out the door because we do not support the fashion industry, which I'm in. So of course I'm going to talk about it. And also, in addition to that, there are a number of, there's just a number of industries that we're not in. Green technologies, clean technology, please contact me to hear more.
Thank you. Seeing no further rebuttals, we'll move on. I'm also aware that it now looks like I'm sitting in the dark as the light outside has faded. I'm not. It's an unfortunate effect of a dark background and a ring light. It's not intended to be sinister. Moving on to our next question. How can Canada respond to and help in humanitarian crises, such as those which have recently occurred in Sudan, Syria, and Afghanistan? Mr. Bittle, you are first. Your time starts now.
Thank you so much. And seeing the images from Afghanistan have been horrific. It's important for Canadians to remember that we haven't had military infrastructure on the ground since 2014, but Canadians expect when crises emerge around the world, Canada steps up, like we did in Syria during 2015. We said we would take 50,000 refugees, and we did. During the Folk Arts Multicultural Festival, when it's able to run, I'm proud that we have a new open house, and that's the Syrian open house. And we'll once again step up to accept 20,000 Afghan refugees, those who helped us when the Canadian soldiers were there, and those from vulnerable groups like women, judges, journalists, and members of the LGBT community. Canadians expect us to step up. We've done it before, and we'll do it again.
Thank you. Ms. Waller, your answer, please.
Thank you, Hugo. I think Chris is right in one thing. Canadians do expect us to step up, and they expected us to step up when the crisis was unfolding in Afghanistan. We all watched in horror as the humanitarian crisis unfolded, and instead of addressing it like Canadians should and do, the Prime Minister decided to go to an unnecessary election. I personally work in humanitarian aid and providing international humanitarian aid to underserved communities. And I can tell you that anytime I'm on a mission around the world, over time and time again, I hear how well respected Canada is on the world stage when different NGOs and different groups work together with government to provide aid to these serious situations. And I'm confident that under an Aaron O'Toole government, we will have our voice and our integrity restored on the world stage.
Thank you. Ms. McLennan, I now turn to you. Your 60 seconds starts now.
Thank you so much. The NDP has always held human rights at the core of everything we do and how we show up in the world. With all of the various tragedies that are happening across the world, the NDP, an NDP government would show up in the same way, supporting our allies and supporting the people who need help as best as we can. And that's something that we've always been committed to. And that's something that is a huge part of what we know to be brand Canada. And that's because those reflect the values of Canadian people. And that's the way that we would govern. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Hahn, you're up next. The floor is yours.
Yes, I just wanted to point out, I think it's really unfortunate that Trudeau really should have started pulling people out of Afghanistan when he knew Biden was going to be doing that. I think that's very unfortunate. And I think that if he would have acted quicker and sooner, we wouldn't be in as horrible of a situation as we are.
Thank you. And finally, Ms. Rhodes, go ahead, please.
I'm going to take a few seconds at the beginning of my statement to just thank my colleagues for all of your work on these issues, and not just my colleagues here, but my colleagues in the Green Party, obviously, for a lot of the humanitarian aid work that they've done and that they've provided. Before I go on, regarding Afghanistan, I agree. We knew about it and we should have been able to get more people out. I think the first thing we need to do is find out exactly how many Canadians are on the ground, and then to maintain our contact with aid agencies and people who are currently on the ground and have stayed in Afghanistan through this crisis. And that applies to every crisis. The Green Party is a humanitarian party. We do believe in our peacekeeping role, not a war-making role. And that is what we will continue to be. When people see a Canadian uniform, we want them to feel safe, to continue to feel safe, and to feel like that's someone who's there to support them.
Thank you. As no rebuttals have been offered, we'll now move on to our next topic, which is the economy. Fighting the economic effects of the pandemic has resulted in mounting federal public debt. What are your plans to return to fiscal balance, and what timeframe do you anticipate that happening in? Ms. Waller, I turn to you first, please. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Hugo. Canada has an unprecedented deficit and debt problem. After 6 years of Justin Trudeau and the Liberals, Canada will run a $168 billion deficit this year, and our national debt is approaching $1.3 trillion. Now, spending to protect Canadians in a pandemic was the right thing to do, and Conservatives supported it. But we can't pass along unsustainable debt to our children and grandchildren. That's why we need to get our economy moving again. Initiatives like our Canada Job Search Plan and the doubling of the Canada Worker Benefit to low and modest income Canadians will help us achieve our goal and recover 1 million jobs lost during the pandemic. I encourage you to look at our fully costed plan, the economic growth, and a disciplined approach to new spending.
Thank you. Ms. McLennan, I turn to you now, please.
Sorry, having a little bit of trouble there unmuting. Thank you so much for the question. The economy is obviously of utmost importance, and holistically, we know that so many of the issues that we're facing as Canadians are interconnected. Our plan, the NDP plan, which has recently been costed, will collect $166 billion in revenues to contribute to the economy by making sure that the wealthiest among us pay their fair share. We will invest in green economic recovery because, again, we can't separate the economy from what is happening in the environment. So we are the party that has a plan to make sure that we shift away from fossil fuels and move towards a green economy so that we can do our part in making sure that we meet the goals of the Paris Accord. And again, coming back into how we behave on the global stage, that we meet our commitments.
Thank you so much. Ms. Han, I now turn to you for your answer to this question. Go ahead, please.
Okay, so yeah, first we want to phase out the COVID spending programs as we open up the economy. We want to start phasing those out in order to balance the budget. We want to get rid of the deficit by the end of the first mandate through spending cuts such as $5 to $10 billion in corporate welfare, $5 billion in foreign development aid, and we want to defund the CBC, which will free up about $1 billion. As Christina mentioned, there's, approximately a $1 trillion debt and a $350 million deficit. So we want to be very strategic with our foreign aid. We want to basically focus our efforts more on economic crisis, mental health crisis, and homelessness crises in these other countries. And we basically want to use, there's the analogy of when you're on the airplane and you put the oxygen mask on. So they always tell you to put the oxygen mask on yourself before you help somebody else do it. So we want to just make sure that our country is taken care of first.
Thank you, Ms. Han. Ms. Rhodes, I now turn to you, please.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes, the question was, fighting.
Oh, I remember. Never mind. I'm going to interrupt you. I was like, okay, what was it about? I think it's important to look at when we were doing well and what was different at that time. The last time that the budget was balanced from being in such a severe deficit was under Jean Chrétien. And what did he do? He did the work. He rolled up his sleeves and he was realistic about what can and cannot be done. Right now, we're in the wrong industries. We're doing all of the wrong things, and we're sticking to these old fogey ideas. I apologize for using that colloquialism, but we're sticking to very old-fashioned ideas and old-fashioned businesses that weren't working then and aren't working there. Now, prior to the pandemic, we weren't making money. We were losing money. Prior to the pandemic, we were already in debt. And who was making money during this? Amazon. Who was making money during this? Big businesses from overseas. And the reason why they were making money is because they changed their business model and they focused on tech infrastructure. They focused on the 75% of people who are shopping online prior to COVID-19, and they grew instead of shrinking. And that's what we need to do to grow our economy. We need to focus on industries that we have typically been ignoring.
Thank you. Mr. Bittle, you are the final answer for this question. Go ahead, please.
Thank you so much, Hugo. And in March of 2020, there was a lot of calls from constituents who were worried about losing their home, losing their businesses. The federal government stepped up. We said we would have your backs, and we did. On one hand, the Conservatives are telling us we would keep all the funding programs that are in place, but just in the previous answer, we've been told that we're spending too much, which shows what the Conservatives view supporting Canadians during the most difficult crisis we face since the Second World War. We need to step up. The government took on debt so that Canadians didn't have to. And we still have a strong fiscal track record. We're one of, I believe, only Canada and Germany have AAA credit ratings across the world. The world knows Canada has the fiscal firepower to deal with this crisis. We dealt with it, we have Canadians' backs, and we will continue to see them through to the other side of this crisis.
Thank you so much. I am seeing a number of candidates wish to offer rebuttals. I'll turn first to Ms. Waller. Your 30 seconds begins now.
Thank you, Hugo. I wanted to finish my thought and frankly, just say that I don't believe that you can actually trust the Liberals on this issue because in economic good times between 2015 and 2019, Justin Trudeau built up more public debt than any prime minister who did not have to fight a world war or a recession. So again, I encourage you to look at our fully costed plan. Through economic growth and a disciplined approach to new spending, we can balance Canada's budget within 10 years without making big cuts. And once we get the budget balanced, then we can start looking at the debt. Just like in Ontario right now, I hear politicians say that
that's all the time we have for your rebuttal. I do apologize. I'm also seeing that Ms. McLennan would like to offer a statement in rebuttal, so I'll now turn to her. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Here's a couple of key facts for you. During the pandemic, Canadian billionaire wealth went up by $78 billion. Canada's wealthiest 87 families collectively own the same amount as the lowest earning 12 million Canadians. This is not acceptable. And this is why we need an economy that works for everyone and not just the wealthiest among us.
Thank you. Seeing no other, oh, sorry, Ms. Hahn would also like to offer a rebuttal, so I will give her 30 seconds. Please go ahead.
Sorry about that. It was a last minute thing here. I just wanted to point out, when the Liberals say that they have our back, what they mean is they're basically using our tax dollars to keep funding these programs. If they just unlocked the country, if we ended these lockdowns, we wouldn't be in the crisis we are. We would be able to start climbing out of it. So when they tell you, the Liberals say that they have your back, it's really our backs. It's our money. It's money coming out of our pocket and out of our grandchildren's and our children's pockets.
Thank you. Seeing this time no further rebuttal, so we'll move on to our next question on the economy. And the pandemic strained our supply chains past their limits, resulting in shortages of many goods from hand sanitizer to lumber. What work must be done to strengthen our capability to manufacture and source our necessary goods? I turn first to Ms. McLennan, please.
Thank you so much. We need to bring back manufacturing to Canada. And that's part of what we want to do in building a greener economy. We can have things that are made here, bought here, sold here, right? For the people here and for the people of the world. And that's what we want to do. The economy must undergo a transformation, and the NDP is the party with the plan to lead that transformation. Again, not years from now, but right away. We have to get moving. All of this is a moot point if we don't have an earth that will sustain us. And we're at the stage where we're looking at catastrophic existence, right? We're in the midst of an existential crisis. And so we must act now. And that's the way to do it, is by bringing things back and making sure that we're here supporting people and supporting the planet.
Thank you so much. Ms. Hahn, I turn now to you. Your 60 seconds starts now.
Sure. So I would agree that we definitely need to bring more manufacturing back to Canada. And one of the ways we can do that is cut the red tape. You know, the regulations are stifling businesses. It's stealing profits from entrepreneurs. And that is essentially forcing people to go to other countries to manufacture there. We want to lower the taxes, and we want to encourage more manufacturing here by reducing the red tape and all the regulations that are making it difficult for people to earn money here.
Thank you so much. Ms. Rhodes, I turn now to you. Please go ahead.
I'm muted. So, am I unmuted? Okay.
Can
you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Sorry about that. Canada once produced 30% of the world's food. We have the most land of many of the G7 nations, I think all of them. In terms of our population, it is about the size of California, and yet we have land the size of the United States. We clearly have enough space to supply ourselves with food, toilet paper, and any other necessity that we might need. And the reason why we're not doing it is because we've committed to oil and gas instead of committing to sustainable communities, instead of committing to clean tech, green technologies, roof gardens. It's all out there, but Canada hasn't put the money into it. So for Greens, it's been really simple. We've had the same plan for years, a plan that other parties have borrowed from when they found out about climate change. We've had the same plan for years to create a sustainable, eco-friendly lifestyle that allows for our own supply chain essentially to be used, and also for us to supply other countries.
Sorry, I do have to cut you off there. We will next move to Mr. Bettel for your response. Go ahead, please.
Thank you so much. And when the pandemic hit, the government of Canada placed a call out to businesses across the country, and Canadian businesses and entrepreneurs stepped up. And we don't have to look too far, even down the road. Dillon's Distillery switching from making fine gin to making hand sanitizer. Companies switching from clothing to PPE, automotive manufacturers making ventilators. But the government of Canada stepped up also to ensure that we have a domestic vaccine capability. There are 3 facilities being built. One of them will be able to come online before the end of the year in Montreal, and 2 others in the Greater Toronto area that will be capable of producing mRNA vaccines. We lost our capability to produce vaccines under a previous conservative government, but we can't let that happen again. We've seen the cost of the pandemic. And as I've said before, there is an economic path out of this pandemic and a public health plan out of this pandemic, and that's through vaccinations. And we need to ensure we have enough vaccines for the future.
Thank you. Ms. Waller, the final answer in this question goes to you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Hugo. As I said before, we must make sure that we are never unprepared for a pandemic again. We were unprepared last year when it hit, and that was obvious. Canada's Conservatives will make sure that Canada is more resilient, reduce our reliance on foreign countries like communist China, and take seriously our responsibility to protect the health of Canadians. Again, we will partner with pharmaceutical companies to increase production of critical medicines and build domestic vaccine capacity here. We spoke earlier about trade and the importance of trade. And we will make sure that we reform Canada's procurement rules to create a vital national interest category that must be sourced in Canada and create a strategy to repatriate and diversify supply chains to move them away from China. These are just among the many measures that we will take.
Thank you so much. Seeing that Ms. Rhodes would like to offer her fifth and final rebuttal of this debate, so please go ahead. Your 30 seconds begins now.
You know, I hate to defend an opponent here, but we actually found out we lost the ability to produce vaccines under the previous Trudeau administration, and that was not a Conservative government. The Conservative government cut the program because the program was experiencing losses, but that was because of the Trudeau government changing it over to a for-profit model. The current government is still using a for-profit model of vaccine production, and it will probably be just as successful as the previous one once we no longer need a massive influx of vaccines artificially created by forcing people to get them.
Thank you. Ms. Hahn, I also see you would like to offer a rebuttal. Please go ahead.
I just wanted to point out on to Christina's point with the regard to manufacturing in China. I just wanted to speak on behalf of some of my fellow, not my fellow, but some of my friends who work in the healthcare industry, that they have some major concerns with regard to their personal protective equipment, because most of it is coming from China, where the virus originated. That's a huge concern for a lot of them. And I just wanted to say on behalf of them, like, we need to do something different. We need to get their PPE from Canada.
Hey, thank you. Seeing no further rebuttals, I'll move on to our next question, which is on the topic of climate change. And we have received this question in one form or another from several people and organizations. And obviously it is a very important question to them. What concrete commitments can you make on policies that will reduce our emissions and the threat of climate change? I turn first to Ms. Hahn. Go ahead, please.
So obviously this is something controversial with our party and our platform. So I do want to point out that we do acknowledge that climate does change. In fact, it's constantly changing. But I personally believe in responsibility when it comes to the environment. I'm a bit of a narc about the recycling, and I try to, reduce waste as much as possible. But here's the thing, when you have a government who tells you that we're in a climate crisis, but flies everywhere in private jets, and has a bunch of planes flying overhead at the G7 summit just for fun, we need to wake up and smell the hypocrisy. Also, when we have places like China and India that are mass producers of carbon and they don't care about the environment, we're essentially going to tax Canadians. Really, we're spinning our wheels for nothing, because if we have mass producers like China and India that are producing CO2 emissions, our little part isn't really going to do much globally.
Thank you. I turn to Ms. Rhodes next for your answer. Go ahead, please.
Oh, sorry. In this election, we've finally started talking about climate change, and I'm glad that we have, but Greens have been talking about climate change for a long time, possibly the longest, and have been told by every single party represented here, except the PPC, they're new, but every other party represented here, that we were crazy. I think our position on climate change is so well known, I might just take up this 60 seconds not talking about it, but we do need to listen to the experts. We need to understand the impacts. The UN has finally rung the alarm bell on climate change. And in 6 years of Liberal government, that has been 6 years of never meeting a single climate goal. We have, and investing in fossil fuels and large scale oil development, we would end all extraction of fossil fuels, Trans Mountain first. We would transition workers to a decarbonized economy, and we would invest in the $2.5 trillion clean tech industry and renewable resources, because at the end of the day, you can't just keep digging up the planet and hope that the planet just keeps reproducing. That's not how it works.
Thank you so much. Mr. Bittle, you are next to respond. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. And we don't have to look too far to see the impacts of climate change with our own eyes. We've had air quality advisories because of forest fires out west. But we've taken action since 2015, and there's been no government in the world that has done more on the climate crisis than ours, like putting a price on pollution and putting more money in the pockets of Canadians, making historic investments in nature conservation and public transit, phasing out coal-fired electricity and moving towards renewable energy, giving Canadians $5,000 to purchase zero-emissions vehicles and renovating their homes, and moving to ban harmful single-use plastics. Now, Thomas Mulcair, the former leader of the NDP, calls our plan marvelous, while Andrew Weaver, who's the former BC Green leader and a leading climate change scientist himself, says that our plan is bold and thoughtful. On the other hand, Aaron O'Toole can't even convince his own party that climate change is real, and they voted against such a resolution at their latest policy convention.
Thank you. Next up in our rotation is Ms. Waller. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Hugo. This is a lot like the promises from the Liberals on childcare, on first past the post, on, a lot of the same, all talk, all headlines, and no action. Under Justin Trudeau, Canada is the only G7 nation whose greenhouse gas emissions have increased since the signing of the Paris Accord. This is another example, like I said, of the rhetoric that doesn't match their record or results. We accept the reality of climate change, and that's why we will meet our Paris Accord commitments and reduce emissions by 2030 without driving jobs and investment out of the country. We will fight climate change and protect the environment, but we won't do it on the backs of Canadians. Our plan will set a carbon price starting at $20 per ton, increasing to $50 per ton, as compared to the Liberal plans, which would bring the carbon tax up to $170 per ton. Life is already expensive for Canadians and the people of St. Catharines, and this would make it unbearable. Instead of sending your money to Ottawa from the carbon pricing, we will create a low carbon savings account to help Canadians make greener lifestyle choices while allowing them to decide what works best for them and their family.
Thank you. And for the final answer to this question, I turn to Ms. McLennan. Go ahead, please.
Thank you so much. The NDP has a plan that believes that if you are going to fight this climate crisis, we've gone past just climate change. We are in a climate crisis, and we have to fight it like we actually want to win. So no more, buying a pipeline while saying that we're fighting we're going to lower carbon. This is not what we're going to do. We're going to eliminate fossil fuel subsidies once and for all. We're going to undo the Liberals' decision to let big polluters off the hook. We're going to cut emissions by more than a half and meet the 1.5-degree target that scientists say is necessary to prevent catastrophe. We're going to create hundreds of good-paying jobs by investing in clean energy, energy-efficient, affordable homes, electric transit, and zero-emission vehicles, and we will retrofit all homes across the country.
Thank you so much. Mr. Bittle is offering a statement in rebuttal. So I will turn the mic to him. You have 30 seconds starting now.
Thank you so much. Liberal government has flattened the curve on pollution. We have a plan to reduce our emissions by 40% overall. And Aaron O'Toole's Conservatives are going to take us back to 30%, which will actually be in violation of our Paris climate change promises and treaties. We have a plan. We have a path forward. It is a realistic plan. And we cannot trust the Conservatives on the environment. We've seen it with Stephen Harper. We've seen it with Doug Ford. We just can't be trusted.
Thank you. Now that concludes the pillars that we have tonight, but for the time that we have remaining, we have received a number of questions from our audience. And unfortunately, we do not have anything close to the time we need to get to all of them, but I would like to pose a few of them to you right now. The first question comes from Mario, who asks, was this election necessary in the middle of a pandemic, and what purpose does it serve? I turn first to Ms. Rhodes, please.
No, this election was not necessary in the midst of a pandemic. It never should have been called. It was put through Parliament, for some reason voted for, and I don't understand why. I know that everyone sitting here today, including Chris Biddle, voted against it. No, it wasn't necessary during a pandemic, particularly since from what we're seeing from the polls, we're just going to end up with the same exact government makeup anyway. No one has grown, no one has shrunk. We might end up with different MPs in office, but at the end of the day, the seats are going to look exactly the same as they did the last time. Yes, it could have waited. Yes, it should have waited.
Thank you. Mr. Biddle, I turn now to you for your answer, please.
Thank you so much, Hugo. And we've heard this at the doors and questions been asked, but I want to tell residents that my last 6 months in Parliament over the past 6 years have been the most toxic that I've ever seen it. Important pieces of legislation, logjam, like banning conversion therapy, strengthening the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, which hasn't been strengthened in more than 20 years, and addressing systemic discrimination in our justice system languish. Conservatives playing games, delaying everything as much as possible. We offer the opposition the chance to debate more, they refuse. The Conservatives play games, the NDP sit on their hands and don't offer to get us through. Canadians want us to see the parties working together, but it's not happening. This toxic environment needs to be changed. Canadians need to give a mandate to Parliament. Our world is different between 2019 and 2021. It's time for Canadians to provide Parliament with a path forward and a mandate to get out of this crisis.
Thank you. Ms. Waller, you're up next. Your 60 seconds starts now.
Thank you, Hugo. I too don't believe that we should be in an election right now. It's the number one question I get at the doors. Why are we in an election? Why was this called? Why is the Prime Minister spending $600 million in the middle of a national health crisis on an unnecessary election? Conservatives did help pass legislation when it was needed, and the other parties have made it very clear that the Trudeau Liberals would have had the ability to continue working. And I must say that I do hope some of Catharine's predictions there are wrong, because we need to stand up with Canadians and tell this Prime Minister that this was not okay. And your vote matters on September 20th, and I hope that you make it count. Under Justin Trudeau, we have never been so divided as a country. We are going into a ton of debt, and we need to get this country back on track.
Thank you. I turn next to Ms. McLennan for your response, please.
Thank you so much. By calling an election in a pandemic, Justin Trudeau just shows again that he cares more about power than he does about people. This is exactly why you need more New Democrats fighting for you. Canadians want their federal government to focus on helping them get through the pandemic, not on playing political games. Jagmeet has won more help for families, millions of Canadians in the pandemic, and New Democrats are going to keep fighting for helping you and making sure that family needs, all of your family needs are going to get through this pandemic and beyond.
Thank you. And for the final answer to this question, I turn to Ms. Hahn. The floor is yours.
Yes, well, I agree with all my colleagues here that, yes, everyone is asking why would he call an election right now? This is just another example of Trudeau speaking out both sides of his mouth. He's telling us that we need to stay home. We're in a pandemic. We're in a crisis, lockdown. And out the other side of his mouth, he is telling people to go out and start campaigning and doing this election. So again, it just makes you question everything that he says and does, because he literally speaks out both sides of his mouth constantly.
Thank you. And we have Ms. Whaler, who would like to offer her final rebuttal of this debate. Please go ahead. You have 30 seconds.
Thank you, Hugo. I'm using this rebuttal because I think it's such an important topic. My colleague himself voted in favor of a motion calling an election during the pandemic irresponsible. It was irresponsible. It is irresponsible. But Aaron O'Toole is ready. He has a plan, and we are ready to lead this country into economic recovery. And we need somebody who's responsible with integrity at the helm.
Thank you. Seeing no further rebuttals, I will move on. Our next question comes from an audience member who asked that their name not be shared. It is, what will you do to achieve more diversity and inclusion in the city? And what are your plans to combat racism? And I turn first to Mr. Biddle. Go ahead, please.
Thank you so much for the thoughtful question. And it's something that I've tried to do since elected in 2015 is call out racism when I see it, to use my office and to use my position to condemn racism, condemn what we see, condemn Islamophobia, condemn colonialism, and to address policies and move forward. I'm concerned, and we see the division in Canada, but right-wing parties like the Conservatives and PPC playing dog whistle politics to the worst instincts. Erin O'Toole voting against a motion because it had the word Islamophobia in it. And I've spoken to so many people at the mosque and in our community who face Islamophobia on a daily basis. If we have a leader like Erin O'Toole who can't even acknowledge Islamophobia in the House of Commons, how can we tackle issues like diversity, colonialism, and racism in our country? Thank you.
Thank you. I turn next to Ms. Waller for your response, please.
Ending racism and discrimination is not a political issue, it's a human issue. We are fortunate to live in a country like Canada, and like my grandparents and thousands of people from all over the world, they came here every year with hopes of a better life for themselves and their family. But too often that sense of opportunity is not equally shared by all Canadians. And I personally believe that there are institutions where systemic racism or discrimination does exist. And honestly, I think when we talk about racism and discrimination, it's just so important to give space and room to those who have lived experiences. We need to listen. We can't assume anything, and we have to make change where we can lift people up. We've seen an increase in incidents of racism throughout the pandemic, and that's why we have to continue to speak out, as Conservatives have, on the rise of anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and racism against our BIPOC communities. Rather than trying to divide Canadians, as Justin Trudeau has tried to do throughout his campaign, this is something that all parties need to be working on together.
Thank you very much. I turn next to Ms. McLennan for your answer. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. As a visibly Black woman, it is imperative that we have the discussion around race in this Canada, and too many times we're talking at cross purposes. What one group of people consider to be racist, the most overt things which continue to happen. Racist hate crimes have tripled since the pandemic has begun. And those things are easier to spot and tackle. And the NDP has a plan for that. That's baseline. But we also have to look at systemic racism, and the NDP has a plan to begin to stamp that out as well. So we can take action right now with the national effort to tackle the rise in hate crimes by confronting hate and white supremacy, put an end to systemic racism in the RCMP, and very crucially, gathering race-based data to track the problem and to implement solutions that will resonate for the people who are most affected by racism.
Thank you so much. I turn now to Ms. Hahn. Your 60 seconds begins now.
So I have a lot of concerns about the just the constant talk about racism and all those things. I feel like constantly telling BIPOC communities or people that they are hated by their community and that we are essentially a very racist country, I feel like in itself is racist. It's a form of segregation in a sense, like constantly telling them that they're hated and saying, oh, these people are hated here and these people are hated here. That is segregating. We're not, I don't believe that we are inherently a racist country. I don't see that in and amongst my peers. I don't see it as a community. I know it exists. Don't get me wrong. I acknowledge it exists. And when there are crimes against people of color, it's disgusting. But the other thing I wanted to bring up is CBC, Trudeau's own broadcasting network has.
Sorry, I do have to cut you off there over time here. I'm going to turn to Ms. Rhodes for the final answer in this round, please.
I agree. Telling us we're hated is terrible, and I would enjoy it if people would stop telling me that I'm hated in this community. I would also very much enjoy if people would stop vandalizing my house with racist terminology or offensive to LGBTQ terminology. And I would enjoy it if we were to attack those behaviors at a government level. It is simply not enough to be not racist. We need to be anti-racist. We need to be getting rid of these problems. And sorry, it affects me personally, so I'm having trouble talking about it because I felt so upset when I heard that question and realized that a person of color did not feel like they could come forward and give their name. And it was the same feeling that I had running for office and giving my name. I feel like I have to hide. People feel like they have to pass because they're terrified of being recognized as ethnic people in this country. And that needs to change from the top down, from the example of our leader, right down to every government office.
There as well. Seeing no rebuttals being offered, I will move on to our next question, which comes from Bob, who asks, what accommodations in government service, employment, and freedom of movement and assembly do you support for unvaccinated persons? What will you do to support the charter rights of all Canadians while addressing public health concerns today and in the future? I turn first to Ms. Waller for your response, please.
Sorry. Thank you, Hugo. I again want to just mention that I am vaccinated and I support vaccination and I encourage everybody to get vaccinated, but we do have to respect the rights of Canadians to determine their own health choices. And I've spoken to people, and there are definitely people in our community that are still vaccine hesitant, and I take the time to listen to them and to hear their concerns. Again, if I thought a mandatory program was a good idea, that it would work, then I would support it, but I don't. We're already among the highest vaccination population in the world. And if we want to get to the last mile, we need to speak with these vaccine hesitant people, understand their concerns, and move together in a united way. This has been a very divisive issue this election, and we need to make sure that everybody in Canada feels confident in their leadership. And rather than trying to divide Canadians, we need to come up with solutions to make sure that we have rapid testing available and screening available and other things.
Thank you. Ms. McLennan, I turn next to you for your answer, please.
Thank you so much. We have to be clear that the health and safety of Canadians must come first. Vaccination, the way that we're talking about it as if it's this new thing that we haven't been doing all along, it's called an immunization card. We have been, and there have always been people who are conscientious objectors. There have always been people who maybe can't take certain things for health reasons. There have always been exceptions to the rules. And so what we're looking at is nothing new. What we're looking at is a profoundly public health issue that is being politicized at a time where we do need to take a trauma-informed lens and continue to educate people about the vaccines and ensure that everybody is safe, and where there need to be exceptions, those exceptions are looked at and granted.
Thank you. I turn next to Ms. Hahn for your response. Your 60 seconds begins now.
Yes, well, obviously, I think it's extremely important that we uphold the rights of all Canadians. It is part of our highest law of the land, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. That should not ever be infringed upon on any condition. So, of course, I think that we need to respect the rights of Canadians. I have lots of friends that are vaccinated. I support them in their decision, and I want to be respected for my decision to not vaccinate. Again, I'll go back to the statistics, the Ontario Public Health statistics that are showing that the COVID deaths are going up as we vaccinate. The death rate is going up. I can't say that enough. That's a huge concern, and every person has the right to question that and make decisions based on those statistics, whether or not they want to be vaccinated.
Thank you. I turn next to Ms. Rhodes for your response, please.
I believe I talked a bit about vaccination earlier, so I'm not going to repeat it. I think that the same things should be observed in government. And I do think that we need some sort of limitations to this so that people can believe that this is a safe law to implement. However, I do want to bring up the fact that Canadians currently don't have a lot of access to our own health data, and that when you ask your doctor for your health record, for example, you don't have it, which contrasts with the system in places like Japan, where you're carrying around a little pocketbook, or in America, where you get all of your own paperwork. And I think the fact that we're currently over-controlled by government does create fear, and it does create situations where people believe that they are they're not safe. And also we need to start focusing on public health and stop treating vaccines as if they're some kind of magical cure, which I know the vaccines are in a lot of cases, but it's not. There are still public health observations that are going to have to be observed. I really walked into that one. We need to stop treating people, adult human beings, as if they're incapable or unable to make their own health decisions.
I do apologize for having
in general.
But I'd go to Mr. Biddle for the final response to this question. Go ahead, please.
Thank you so much, Hugo. And 80% of Niagara residents have stepped up and done their part. And they've gotten vaccinated for themselves, their families, and our community. And the next wave of the vaccine is being fueled by the unvaccinated. It is divisive. It's the unvaccinated that are filling up our hospitals and ICUs. And mandatory vaccine programs work. You have a charter right not to receive a vaccine. That's true. But you don't have a charter right to go into a restaurant. You don't have a charter right to go onto an airplane or a bus or work in the federally regulated workforce. And we're going to stand up to protect Canadians' rights. I have a right not to be infected by others and have their decisions impact me. The federal government needs to stand up for Canadians who've made the decision to get vaccinated and protect themselves. Christine is an aid worker. She knows going abroad, you need proof of vaccinations. Vaccine passports aren't new. Vaccine certifications aren't new. I have to show proof of vaccine for my kids to go to school. This isn't a new thing in our society. It does not violate the Charter of Rights, and government needs to stand up for all Canadians.
Thank you. And I'm seeing that Ms. Hahn would like to offer her final rebuttal of the evening. You have 30 seconds. Please go ahead.
So I just wanted to point out the unvaccinated are not the ones that are mostly filling up the ICUs. There are many vaccinated people that are in the ICUs as well. I have two examples. One person has cancer. He's double vaccinated. He is extremely sick in the ICU with COVID-19. His buddy is also in the hospital in the ICU, fully double vaccinated, and is in the ICU and is in an induced coma. And I would like to point out as well that the St. Catharines—
I do have to cut you off. That is 30 seconds. I do apologize. Seeing no further rebuttals on this question, I'm going to proceed. I think I have time for one last question, and I said I did want to get as many audience questions in as possible. The next question was actually posed by multiple people in different ways. Recent years have seen increases in deaths by overdose in St. Catharines and across the country. What measures would you put in place to end the opioid epidemic, and what policies for the distribution of pharmaceuticals could ensure it does not recur? I turn first to Ms. McLennan, please.
Thank you so much for that question. And it is a very, very devastating crisis that's happening across the country, but is acutely happening here, right here in the Niagara region. The overdose crisis has been fueled by decades of failed drug policy, and it really is time for a new approach. NDP government would, first of all, declare it a public health emergency and would end the criminalization and stigmatization of people who use drugs. We would expunge criminal records for personal possession, simple personal possession, and ensure that we provide low barrier access to a safe supply. We'd also expand access to harm reduction, treatment, and recovery services across Canada. And we'd launch an investigation into the role that pharmaceutical companies may have played in this crisis and impose some consequences if there were any wrongdoing to be found. When you look at places like Portugal, you can see how this kind of change can take place and really transform people's lives for the better, and that's what the NDP will do.
I do have to cut you off at that point. Ms. Hahn, I turn to you next for your response. Go ahead, please.
So yes, there's definitely an issue with overdoses, which has been extremely exacerbated by the lockdowns. So again, of course, I'm going to go back to, we need to end these lockdowns. A lot of issues too come from a lot of people's support groups were taken away during the pandemic. So you have some people that were able to get off of the drugs, and then their support groups were taken away and they fell right back into their addiction issues. So we need to end these lockdowns. And I personally think that we need to stop looking to big pharma to cure people's mental health issues. There are years and years of trauma in most cases, and we need to invest in therapy and get the people the help they need so they can work through the issues rather than just thinking they're going to pop a pill to fix all their problems, because that only leads to addiction and then homelessness.
Thank you so much. Ms. Rhodes, I now turn to you for your response. Go ahead, please.
I've worked in addiction resources for a number of years, and a number of my clients said, contrary to decriminalization, that unfortunately prison was the only chance that they had to get off drugs. To me, that is a strong statement from a number of people telling me that we clearly need more addiction-specific treatment. Currently, addiction is lumped in with mental health, and I think that's the problem that we're having. It's being treated as a mental health issue and as an ongoing issue rather than something with a graduation date, something that people can get away from. We need more addiction-specific treatment workers. We need to stop building buildings and start hiring people that will work with people. And yes, we do need to take a more holistic view to this, because if you continuously tell people that they need drugs to get better, then they're going to believe that drugs are what is going to fix them, when oftentimes it's what sends them down the hole. Finally, we need to recognize the difference between drug use and drug abuse, stop criminalizing drugs specifically, and start looking at addiction itself.
Thank you. I turn next to Mr. Bittle. Your 60 seconds starts now.
Thank you so much. One of the images that is most burned into my mind being Member of Parliament was a ride-along I did with St. Catharines Fire Services. And our first call of the night was to no vital signs absent call in Montebello Park. And one of our neighbors, member of our community, was lying down unconscious, drug overdose in a washroom at Montebello Park. We need to do more. The criminal justice system has failed in terms of opioid use and drug addiction. We need to be talking about safe supply. I'm proud that I stood up as the Member of Parliament and said we need a supervised injection site in St. Catharines, while Conservative politicians were condemning them. We need to address safe supply. We need to work with provinces who have bold plans based on public health, not criminal justice. It hasn't worked. It won't work. We need to be bold as we move forward.
Thank you very much. And for the final response to this question, I turn to Ms. Waller. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Hugo. Every day, 17 Canadians die from opioid-related deaths. And since the onset of COVID-19, opioid-related deaths have almost doubled. Here in our community, anybody who goes downtown can see that we have a problem. I've spoken to people at the doors, and this is an issue that is brought up often as well. I just spoke to somebody 2 days ago whose niece had fallen victim to the opioid crisis, and the people of St. Catharines want this addressed. Canada's Conservatives will treat the opioid epidemic as an urgent health crisis. It's not enough to talk about the opioid crisis as a standalone silo, though. We must talk about it as a whole. It's not only about safety, but also recovery, and afterwards making sure that they're able to join our economy. It's a holistic approach that we need to do. And to help those struggling with addiction and save lives, Canada's Recovery Plan will invest $325 million over the next 3 years to create 1,000 residential drug treatment beds and build 50 recovery community centers across the country. And I can tell you, I'll be advocating to make sure that we get one of those down here in Niagara. We will reorient the Canadian drugs and substances strategy towards ensuring that every person struggling with addiction has the opportunity to recover. As a country, we must recognize that this is a national crisis and address it.
Thank you so much. I do see that Ms. Rhodes and Ms. Han would like to offer rebuttals, but I did say that only 5 would be given to each candidate, and so I'm sorry, but I'm not able to indulge those requests, although I'm sure you have many interesting things to say. And on that note as well, we are rapidly running out of time. There are many excellent questions that were submitted, which we did not get an opportunity to ask, but I would once again encourage everyone who watches tonight to get in touch with the candidates here directly, to pose your questions to them. This is your opportunity to make your views known and to ask for their input on these important questions. I would like now to offer candidates the opportunity to make a closing statement, which, as I said, will be delivered in the reverse order of the opening statement, which means Ms. Han, it will be the first. Please go ahead. You have 90 seconds.
Well, thank you everybody for listening tonight. I do, of course, have a lot to learn about the ins and outs of politics, but I will listen to the concerns of my constituents if I'm voted in, and I will use all available resources to ensure my riding is well represented at the federal level. I will do everything in my power to ensure that future generations enjoy the same rights and freedoms as guaranteed by the charter that I have enjoyed up to now. And I would encourage everyone to get out there and vote on September 20th. Please vote with your heart. Vote for somebody that you believe in. Don't worry about voting to get somebody out. You want to get somebody in that you believe in and who you think is going to serve your best interests and the best interests of all Canadians. So that said, please follow me on Facebook or any social media at Rebecca Hahn PPC. Again, our party is going to stand up for your rights and freedoms. And the only way we're going to make the change that Canada needs is if we get out and vote and have your voice heard. This is probably the most important election in Canada. So make sure that you get out on the 20th and have your voice heard. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm now going to turn to Ms. McLennan for your final statements. Go ahead, please.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all of the folks here on this virtual stage and everyone who's made it possible. Friends, New Democrats are different because we are working people. For our whole history, we have fought for better working conditions and standards that lift everyone up. We know that good jobs treat people fairly, can make a real difference to Canadian families, and that setting Canadians up for success in the world, a future of the future, benefits us all. New ways of thinking can shape the recovery from the COVID-19 crisis and help make our economy fairer and deliver the results that we want. And we know that business communities play a very important role in this, and we know that businesses contribute to innovation. And those are the kinds of things that we would like to harness and bring forward with our new plan. Jagmeet Singh and the NDP have a record of fighting for you. We have a record of fighting for small business. We have a record of fighting for people. Instead of protecting billion-dollar companies that profited off the pandemic but paid no tax, they have fought for you and your family, pushing the Liberal government on supports that helped regular Canadians and small businesses get through the pandemic. On September 20th, I hope you'll consider electing me as your MP so that I can fight for you every single day.
Thank you very much. I'll now turn to Ms. Waller for your closing remarks. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Hugo. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today and for all of the thoughtful questions from everybody. I want to thank my opponents also for participating in our democracy. Throughout tonight's debate, I think the choice is clear of more of the same or voting for better. Justin Trudeau and the Liberals thought that they could call an election in the middle of a pandemic and ride an easy wave to a majority. In fact, Justin Trudeau actually suggested himself that if he doesn't get that majority, he'd be prepared to go to an election again in a matter of months. Our country cannot afford more Trudeau politics. Our lives and businesses depend on it. It's time that we have an advocate for our community that's focused on working constructively and collaboratively. As we emerge from the pandemic, we need a plan for all Canadians that will protect our most vulnerable, that will kickstart our economy, and that will keep our community safe. I'm proud to be running as a Conservative. Our platform is full of fresh and innovative ideas, and I encourage you all to check it out at conservative.ca/plan. Many of you voted for the Liberals, or may have, in 2015 and 2019 because you hoped that life would be better, maybe a little bit easier. And the fact is that they have not done that for you. Housing, groceries, and gas are more expensive. You've told me at the doors that you're worried about your family's futures. Erin O'Toole is the Prime Minister that Canada needs right now. We have a plan to make your life better and more affordable. On September 20th, I ask you to join us by securing the future of this country and vote Conservative.
Thank you very much. I now turn to Mr. Biddle for his final remarks. Please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Hugo, and thank you to the GNCC, everyone listening, and for my opponents in this participating in a debate. We've seen the ugliness of politics coming to the houses of politicians, and I want to thank you for this respectful opportunity to debate. We've been there since day one of the pandemic, and we're going to finish the fight against COVID-19. I know that 80% of Niagara residents have stepped up, gotten both of their shots for themselves, their families, and their loved ones. And we need to keep going. Every level of government needs to step up, including the federal government, and we're the only party. A Liberal government will ensure that everyone who gets on a plane, a train, or works in a federally regulated workforce will be vaccinated. We've seen in Ontario that vaccine certificate programs work. It encourages people to get vaccinated. Now, the Conservatives disagree, but they're offering cuts. Aaron O'Toole has talked about his desire for private sector entering our healthcare system. And on guns, he wants to legalize the most horrific weapons we've seen used in our country that will kill the most amount of people possible in the shortest period of time, including the AR-15. On climate, there's been no government in the world that has done more on the climate crisis in the past 6 years than us. We have a real and bold plan to fight climate change, and Conservatives have voted themselves against a resolution that climate change is real. I fought hard for this city to deliver on projects like the Port Piers, affordable housing, and the Canada Summer Games, and I'll work hard to make life more affordable for families, seniors, young people, and build a better life for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Now for the final statements, I go to Ms. Rhodes. Go ahead, please.
I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight, and I'll try not to take up too much of your time. I know that it's late and I've got kids to put to bed myself. Einstein said that insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome. We've had about 100 years of liberal or conservative leadership. We've had the NDP in the House as well. Whatever they were going to do, they've already done. If you're not happy with it, I would encourage you to vote Green. Tonight, we address some very old questions that need some very new and innovative answers. The Green Party is committed to human rights. We are committed to allowing people their dignity. I don't think that we can talk about homeless or Indigenous populations or people of color as a them and us, on a them and us basis. We cannot refer to human beings in that manner, nor treat them as children who need our care. We need to look into solutions that consider people's identities and their own opinions and their own autonomy in their care. There is no them except the one that we create. Greens are committed to a just recovery that allows residents and businesses their dignity, their rights, and gives them the best chance at a beautiful future. If you want to look more into our policies, I encourage you to look them up at my website, www.catharinerhodes.com.
Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry, I know I'm at 10 seconds. I'm an optimist. When you check my name on that box, I'll know that you are too. Thank you so much for being here tonight again. And thank you everyone for supporting other businesses and residents through this crisis.
Thank you very much. Those remarks are over. That means at the end of our debate, it is growing late and I am now actually sitting in the dark. So it seems like a good time to wrap it up. I will offer my heartfelt thanks to all the candidates for joining us tonight, for putting yourselves in the public eye and being pelted with questions by someone like me for 2 hours. It is not easy, and we do appreciate the sacrifices that you're making, that you're willing to make on behalf of the City of St. Catharines. For our audience, I also thank you for joining us and taking the time to become informed voters. I hope that this debate has helped you with your decision on the 20th, and of course, please go out and vote. With that, I would like to turn the microphone to Mishka Balsam, the CEO of the GNCC, to close out the evening. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. On behalf of all of our attendees, I can say to you, our panelists, thank you for giving us the past 2 hours. And I really have appreciated actually that you stayed focused on the policies that are there and the policies, and those are the things that actually the people who've signed up for today's webinar and for today's town hall were interested in. So thank you for conveying that, your policy platform, and as well at the same time for conveying your passion for St. Catharines and for the country we call home. In addition to that, I wanted to also extend that which Hugo had said at the beginning of it, and that is that you actually are willing to put your name forward for public service of representing the community of St. Catharines in Parliament. Being a member of Parliament can be rewarding in so many ways, but also, as we have seen, it comes with its own hand of challenges. So thank you for putting your name forward. Some of the attendees have reached out to us too and wanted to see what our chamber federal platform is. That is based on what the business community and our members have asked for. And for that, please turn to gncc.ca for a full outline of our platform. I would be remiss not to thank my colleague Hugo for leading us through the debate. It was extraordinary, and thank you for keeping everyone on time and focused on the debate that's there. For the attendees that have been with us for the past 2 hours, the names of these candidates will be on the ballot on September the 20th. Please do all that you can do between now and then to learn more about the candidates for St. Catharines, their parties and their platforms, and make sure you know how and where to vote. Thank you for being with us this evening. As we have said beforehand, this session was recorded, is available on our YouTube site, as well as will be available on our website shortly. So thank